Hey there, Hexers. This is Function here. So I don't have my own invite for Alpha yet, but thanks to the goodwill of a couple of my buddies, Colin and Guare, they were able to hook me up with Alpha access, and I've been able to fiddle around with the client and, make some decks and play against some other people, and it's been a lot of fun so far. There's definitely been, bugs. That's to be expected. But as I'm coming across them, I've been reporting them. And if you're watching this video and you've been playing Alpha, you should definitely be reporting the bugs as you find them. There's a whole forum on the official Hex forums. There's a subsection for bug reporting, and if you come across something that doesn't seem right, you should definitely be reporting it. It helps everybody out, helps get the game out in everybody's hands a little faster, and it'll just help make the game be that much better. So in Alpha right now, there's still about 70 cards or so that haven't been scripted and aren't available to play with, so we can't include those in the deck builder. So the game isn't fully balanced to what we're currently experiencing. It's supposed to be balanced to what we're going to have once we have those 70 cards. With that said, there's 3 cards in particular that really stand out right now. One of them is Gas Troll, which is a really strong, fast, aggressive card. There's Fist of Brigadon, which is an incredibly powerful 6-drop. It's a 7/7 with Crush and Invincible, so it's very hard to deal with. Once it hits the table, there's not a whole lot of cards that can actually remove it. You can Interconflict it, and you can bounce it, and you can use Mesmerize on it. But past that, there's not too much that can really help you survive a Fist of Brigadon. And the final card that I'm going to be highlighting in this deck is Demented Demolisher. Demented Demolisher is really fun to play with. It's fun to build around. It can fit in all kinds of different decks, whereas those other 2 cards kind of need to go in a very specific type of deck, or at least I would say they do. But Demented Demolisher, there's already quite a few different builds for him. He's a powerful card, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So here you go. Hope you enjoyed the deck tech. Alrighty, so the other day when I was streaming, I was, I was in between games, and I was figuring, it's time to build something new. This was one of the first days of Alpha, and really all I was trying to do is I wanted to play a deck that had Soothing Breeze in it. I wanted to play a deck where the only goal was to survive as long as possible. It wasn't even to have any win conditions in the deck, but I started toying around, and turns out this deck is pretty decent. So the cat's out of the bag. Demented Demolisher turns out to be one of the strongest cards currently in Alpha. It's a 5-cost troop that's a 3/3, and it says when this troop enters play, you may void all resources from your deck. So once you play it, the only cards you're going to be drawing are cards that matter for the most part. There's a couple cards that might be bad top decks, but you're not going to be drawing any more resources. You're giving yourself a lot more fuel in the late game once you play Demented Demolisher, and he's definitely very, very powerful, especially with escalation cards. So that's the card that is primarily featured in this deck. He is very strong, and we are playing 4 copies of him. Let's go through the deck list real quick. I'll explain each choice, and yeah, so let's talk about the resources first. We are playing 17 blood shards, and we are playing 14 diamond shards. That's 31 resources total. That kind of goes up and down a little bit. This deck list has changed a couple times for me. It's something, just trying out different cards, seeing how they work, whether I like them or not. So the resources go up and down, but generally that's where I've been hovering, is like the 29 to 34 resource range. And once you play Demented Demolisher, you usually have about 20 cards left in your deck, maybe even less, and you're going to be in pretty good shape. So we have 1 Secret Laboratory. I should talk about maybe Pact Pain first. Is that Pact Pain is a constant that you pay 2 and pay 2 health as well. You draw a card. A big thing here to think about is what's the opportunity cost of drawing a card. Well, each turn you're going to draw a card at the beginning of your turn, and if that's the only card you're drawing while your opponent is attacking, they might be hitting you for 7 damage a turn. At that point, the opportunity cost of drawing a card is basically 7 life. If you're using Pact Pain instead, though, you're getting it for less than that, which is great, especially if you have the life gain cards like Eternal Youth in your deck. You just kind of take a risk of using Pact Pain to try to find Eternal Youth in some cases. So Pact Pain's really strong for the deck. Once you have it in the late game, you are probably going to win very quickly. And the big thing, though, is that it's kind of weak in multiples. If you have 2 Pact Pains out, it's basically not any better whatsoever than having 1 out, unless they destroyed one of them or something. But because of that, we are playing 3 Pact Pain and a Secret Lab, which you know, kind of is a functional fourth copy of Pact Pain. It lets us draw a card and discard a card. So if you draw a late game Demolisher and you already have played one, you can discard it and try to find something useful. Likewise, the same with Pact Pain or a couple other cards. Alright, so we'll talk about the win conditions. Sliver of the Immortal Spear is our kind of backup win condition. If the game goes really late and we're not kind of finding a way to win, we can do this. It's, you know, it's really slow. It's really only there as a backup for a couple matchups where you might otherwise have trouble. Kind of if you're playing the mirror match and they're going really slow and you're going really slow, sometimes Sliver comes into play. Basically any other deck that's playing Eternal Youth, you're going to need Sliver for. It's definitely possible for them to play so many Eternal Youths that Sliver isn't even relevant anymore. And, you know, we're just kind of out of luck in that case. You don't have to necessarily win every game. You just have to win most of them. And that's a game where we can't win if they have that many Eternal Youths. Then you just look at the sideboard and try to bring stuff in for game 2 and 3. So you only need one copy of it. It is kind of awkward if it gets milled, then it's gone. And this is actually a card that protects you from mill. You can activate it before you draw at the beginning of your turn to put a card into your deck, and then you will be in good shape because you'll be back in the game. You won't be dying because you had no cards in your deck. So that's kind of what this is also there for. It's to protect us from mill, which is definitely a factor right now. It is awkward, like I was saying, though. If it gets milled, you're just out of luck. We have 2 copies. Oh, I was talking about win conditions. So we also have 4 copies of Life Siphon. This is our primary win condition. This is the way you're going to win probably like 95% of your games. Almost all the games I've played, I've won off of Life Siphon. I think I've only used Spear to win one of the games. But this is deal X damage to target champion and gain X health. You know, you can activate 2 of them to do 10 damage each and kill your opponent most of the time. Usually you can hit with Demented Demolisher once. If you play him right after an Extinction, in which case they'll be at 17 life and you can do 2 Life Siphons for 9. But a lot of the time you'll find yourself playing 3 for 7 each for 21 damage total. If they played some life gain or they had a troop that gained them some life somehow, you're going to be kind of stretched a little bit more thin on the Life Siphon. But that's why we have Surge Mechanism in the deck. We have 2 copies of this, and this is a card that has 2 roles. It either makes our Life Siphons bigger after playing Demolisher. You know, it's pretty hard to cast a Life Siphon for 10 after you've played Demolisher, and that's what Surge Mechanism is in there for. It's going to be getting us some extra long-term resources. It gives you 1 permanent resource, no temporary ones, for exhausting it and paying 2, which is pretty decent. There's some people playing Hex Engine instead, which you can use to get 2 immediate resources, but I like the long-term value of this because it's kind of a long-term deck. So that's what Surge Mechanism is in there for. It's also in there for a second reason, is that if you're able to draw more cards off of Pact Pain and get a bunch of activations per turn, you're very likely to win the game pretty quickly. So, you know, while you're ramping up to Life Siphon, if something goes wrong and Life Siphon isn't enough to win you the game, well, all of a sudden you can play Surge Mechanism, or you can use Surge Mechanism to get you some more resources that you can Pact Pain more times and draw the cards that you did need to win the game. So that's pretty good. Life Siphon also, sometimes you just use it not to win the game, but to help you stabilize. Speaking of stabilizing, we have 4 copies of Extinction in here. You're going to keep pretty much any hand that has Extinction in it so long as you have 1 or 2 resources. It's really easy to draw the resources you need for Extinction because we're playing so many. That's one of the great things about Demolisher, is you get to play your strong cards. You don't really have to include a whole lot of cards that you don't want to play, you're not too excited about, because you're going to be able to draw all the resources you need eventually to play what you want. Granted, we're not playing anything that costs more than 5, because Demolisher costs 5 himself, and that's kind of where your curve stops, with the exception of Life Siphon. But yeah, Extinction's really strong. You generally want to use it to kill as many of their troops as you think you can. Use it at the very last second. If you have some life gain in your hand, you can do that the next turn. But, you know, every once in a while you just use Extinction to kill 1 troop, and that's all you really need. Alright, so we're running 2 copies of Murder. I'm probably actually going to cut these out eventually. I'll talk about that more in a second. I had been running 4 copies, but there were just a lot of games where I had Murder in my hand all game and I never played it, usually because I had Extinction as well. And the more games I play, the weaker Murder actually feels. This deck just doesn't really need it that much because there's not a whole lot of problem troops that this deck has, and the ones that are really big issues for this deck, Murder doesn't kill him. The only one that Murder is really relevant against right now is Gas Troll. Gas Troll's pretty scary for this deck, and we might just lose a lot of the time if they play a turn 1 Gas Troll. So maybe you have more Murders on the sideboard, you bring them in. I was normally running 4, I'm at 2 right now, and I might cut them entirely. Alright, so I already talked about Pact Pain. Let's talk about Eternal Youth. Pact Pain is very strong with escalation cards, and so is Demented Demolisher. This one will let us continuously use Pact Pain. You know, you're never really going to kill yourself with Pact Pain so long as you've played Eternal Youth like 2 or 3 times over the course of the game. The third time you play it, it's gaining you 20 health, which is pretty incredible. Basically, any deck that's planning to win with creatures is going to have a really hard time if you resolve multiple Eternal Youths. You're just going to take them completely out of range. At some points, you can have upwards of 100,000 health, which becomes completely irrelevant. There's no reason to keep playing it at that point, just because nobody's ever going to do that much damage to you. The big thing, though, with Eternal Youth is that it's really good against the decks that are planning to win with creatures, so long as they're slow, kind of mid-range decks. The really fast, aggressive decks, especially the ones playing like Gas Troll, you're still going to have a lot of problems with them because, this deck is just a little too slow in those cases. So that's kind of why Murder's in there, and it's also why this final card that people have probably been staring at this whole time while I've been talking is in here. Yeah, I'm including 4 copies of Soothing Breeze. When I initially built the deck, I had it in there. Maybe it's just because I thought it was a goofy card. It's considered a really bad card in general. Kind of just one-sided life gain effects that don't really give you a whole lot of health and don't really commit to the board are bad cards. And this is not a very strong card, but we're still playing it anyways. I've said that this was a bad card a whole bunch of times, so I feel like I'm kind of eating my own shoe after doing so. But yeah, I'm still including it. And the main reason is those really early aggressive decks, they're playing cards usually on turn 1, 2, and 3. And most of our cards, well, actually pretty much all of our cards don't have a cost that's lower than 3. We have this and the Spear, and the Spear is pretty much bad in the early game anyways. But yeah, Soothing Breeze is only in here so that we have a turn 2 play against the decks that are really aggressive. It helps us buy just a little bit more time to either draw an Extinction, draw an Answer, play another Eternal Youth, take ourselves out of range, or just get another couple cards off of Pact Pain. So yeah, Soothing Breeze is pretty weak. Eventually, I might cut Soothing Breeze entirely, as well as Murder, and play Inner Conflict instead. There's a couple cards that Inner Conflict deals with that Murder doesn't, and a lot of the cards that Murder solves for us, Extinction also solves. Mainly, I'm talking about what is it? The Fist guy, the Brigadoon. He's a 7/7 who's invincible, so Murder doesn't really protect you against him, but Inner Conflict does. So, yeah, we might cut out Soothing Breeze and Murder entirely. That's 6 cards. We can put in 4 Inner Conflict and then add 2 more resources so that Dementor's a little bit stronger. So yeah, that's pretty much the deck. Like I was saying, it's weak against pretty fast aggressive decks. It's also weak against Mill. There's a couple Mill decks going around, but in general it's a really powerful deck. I'm going to be playing another couple games with it. I'll include that as a separate video though, so that this video doesn't go on too long. Yeah, if you guys have any questions about the deck, or you want to critique my use of Soothing Breeze, definitely hit me up in the comments. Click the like button if you liked the video, and definitely subscribe if you really liked it. Until next time, less fail, more function.